First tonight, Donald Trump has announced that the US will impose 100% tariffs on Russia within 50 days if no peace deal is reached in Ukraine. Mr. Trump also announced that the US will be selling billions of dollars of weapons to NATO countries such as Germany and others, who will then pass them on to Ukraine. Correspondents say it's a real change of tactic with regard to Kyiv and Moscow. They say the administration has been careful not to suggest that these weapons are being given to Ukraine by the US. Instead, they say NATO allies may transfer them to Ukraine and then purchase replacements from the US. They say it creates some distance for the US and makes it look like it's purely business. The NATO Secretary General, Mark Rutte, who was with Mr. Trump, has praised this, describing it as real progress.
One of the reasons that you're here today is to hear that we are very unhappy, I am, with Russia. But we'll discuss that maybe a different day. But we're very, very unhappy with them, and we're going to be doing very severe tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. Tariffs at about 100%. You'd call them secondary tariffs. You know what that means. But today we're going to talk about something else. And as you know, we've spent $350 billion approximately on this war with Russia and Ukraine, and would like to see it end. It wasn't my war, it was Biden's war. It's not my war, I'm trying to get you out of it. And we want to see it end. And I'm disappointed in President Putin because I thought we would have had a deal 2 months ago, but it doesn't seem to get there. So based on that, we're going to be doing secondary tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. It's very simple. And they'll be at 100%. And that's the way it is. That can be more simple. It's just the way it is. I hope we don't have to do it.
Of course, the US will put on its stockpiles necessary to defend this country. That's absolutely clear. But it will mean that Ukraine can get its hands on really massive numbers of military equipment, both for air defense, but also missiles, ammunition, etc., etc.
That's the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte there, and before him, Donald Trump. We'll have more on that in a moment. We'll be doing some analysis on what they've been saying. But first, after Ukrainian troops entered the Kursk region of Russia nearly a year ago in a surprise incursion, Moscow turned to North Korea for help. Pyongyang sent troops to Russia to fight at the front line while it's been supplying large amounts of munitions to Moscow. Relations between Russia and North Korea have continued to strengthen, and on Saturday, the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un offered Moscow his full support during talks with the visiting Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov.
This assessment received visible confirmation of your words in a practical sense in the Kursk region, which you mentioned, where heroic servicemen, fighters of the Korean People's Army, together with Russian fighters at the cost of blood and even life, brought closer the liberation of the Kursk region from the Ukrainian Nazis. We are sincerely grateful to the leadership of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and, of course, to all servicemen, soldiers and officers who demonstrated excellent combat training and made a very important contribution to the just cause of liberating Russian territories.
Well, for more on these stories, I'm joined now on the line from London by the international affairs analyst, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. Dr. Laskiewicz, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's begin with Donald Trump's U-turn on Ukraine. He's announced that the US would impose tariffs on Russia of 100% within 50 days if no peace deal is reached by Moscow in Ukraine. And also announcing that the US is going to be selling billions of dollars of weapons to NATO countries who will then pass them on to Ukraine. Can you dissect it all for us?
Yes. First and foremost, it just shows you that although traditionally one uses the word unstable for Latin American countries, or for that matter, third world countries in general, to be quite honest today, America is as unstable as any country has ever been. It's been virtually impossible to work out which way Donald Trump is going. And that is, as I understand it, the way he likes it. However, this does mean that when he makes threats, no one's entirely certain he won't then beetle off in the other direction, because he amounts to 100, well, not perhaps 180 degrees, but 170 degrees certainly, U-turn. Now, let's look at the actual questions, what he's suggesting. Please note that when he made his talk there, he keeps going out of being Biden's war, and he wants to keep America out of it. This is actually very important in America. Americans are not very keen on wars, and this is what Franklin Roosevelt used to say always, every hope for peace and so on. And so therefore, he's actually closer there to the mainstream America than we think, or than commentators think. However, the key point here is the tariffs. They're not as important as they used to be. Actually, what should be mentioned is that Russia has, in all this time when there have been sanctions, been preparing up a very nasty surprise for the Americans, which is taking root more and more. Namely, the dollar is no longer the currency in which all international deals are done. It is now being done more often in national currencies. And Russia is the key player. And President Putin made this speech last week about how America was no longer in charge of the world economy in that degree, a multipolar world, that BRICS nations are important. And this is actually, economically speaking, as much a threat to America as anything that America may do in terms of tariffs. And so in that respect, the tariffs, which would have been very, very crippling had they been announced in this way before, are actually probably going to be just ignored by Russia, who in any case does a great deal of trade, despite whatever sanctions there are. Number 3, yes, supplying arms. It is a business deal. Donald Trump has made quite clear he doesn't want to put a dollar more into this war. He gets NATO to pay for it. And Rutte, because it's not, of course, his problem either, has agreed to all this, which is good news, but not so good news for the rest of NATO. It means one of the world's richest countries is no longer going to foot the bill. Everybody else is. But may I point out that he also wants, and this is what President Donald Trump is insisting on, everybody to rearm. That's a lot of money going into defense. And now they're going to be paying America to get goods to Ukraine. On this count, Donald Trump is in a win-win situation. Everybody's over the moon as to how he's supplying arms. And at the same time, the Americans are over the moon because they're not costing them a penny. So it's a superb win for him, assuming the other nations, NATO nations, go ahead. And what will happen? I don't know. But there is financial strain looming in the future for many NATO nations, which are actually at the limit of what they are spending on defense now. Please note, countries like Poland are spending a great deal, and it's quite questionable whether they can spend more. In the run-up to World War II, for example, the Polish Chancellor stated, as indeed did the British Chancellor, there was no more money that could be spent. And this is largely the situation, certainly, I think, in both Poland and Britain again today. Moreover, it has not been agreed by NATO. Please note, that the Secretary General is just that. He's not a president, he's a Secretary General. And the other point to note very strongly here is that it also means Donald Trump is speaking to NATO again, which is, again, another part of this volte-face, which is baffling, I think, some people, but means that NATO, which was out, is now back in. Hence the 170 degrees U-turn I referred to previously.
Right, there's a heck of a lot for us to unpack there. Let me just take one of the things that you said, which is the issue of tariffs. Some analysts are suggesting that actually promising 100% tariffs in 50 days is not a very strong response. He could have said he's going to impose sanctions now, couldn't he? I mean, and analysts are saying that 100% tariffs is far less even than he imposed on China. And also they say Russia and the US have almost zero trade right now. So the tariffs are going to have a limited impact if they come in at all.
Yeah, precisely. But tariffs always had a limited impact. As I said, from day one of the war, publicly, I think I was the first person to point out that they should be supplying arms to Ukraine, not putting on sanctions or tariffs. Exactly as you say, there's little trade done. Primary tariffs, secondary tariffs, whatever you call them, it's not very important. Thirdly, But here I must come to Donald Trump's rescue. It can't happen. I'm doing it now. His goal is not to punish Russia, as all the critics assume. His goal is to bring about a ceasefire. So insofar as he's offering an opportunity to negotiate, that actually would fit his strategy. And it is an incorrect, almost invalid criticism to say he should have put them on immediately. He is simply saying to Russia, there's still an opportunity to talk to me. And in that sense, it is not a bad idea. Whether it should be so long a period is another matter. But the actual threat of sanctions is, I'm afraid, irrelevant, tariffs in this case, as I've stated before.
Nevertheless, I expect this news, particularly that of the weapons, will be hugely welcomed in Ukraine after the many sleepless nights in recent weeks with air raid sirens going off every night. I mean, on the other hand, will there also be wariness in Kyiv about the potential fickleness of President Trump?
Well, his instability, yes, there's one point. But the other one is, I've stated, who is going to pay for them in NATO? Who's got the money for this? We are talking about large sums of money. America's a very big country. It's a very rich country. It paid out, whether it was 350 billion or not is a moot point. But either way, it paid out a lot of money and can just about do it despite its huge deficit. Other countries are not so well off. It's going to be actually questionable whether any aid will get to Ukraine because the rest of NATO has to agree to pay for it. And so therefore it is a volte-face. It is important. But whether it actually materializes, please note, is yet to be seen. At the end of the day, please note what happened just recently today. Pistorius in Germany said, we cannot supply more Patriots. These are the anti-missiles systems. We need them for Germany. So when it comes to actually concrete analyses, concrete, if you like, arms arriving, the situation is by no means as good. Far more important than his fickleness, Donald Trump's fickleness, you should put it, is the fact that as things stand, it'll be sometime, if ever, that any of these American arms arrive in Ukraine.
And I mean, I know you touched on this briefly, Dr. Laskiewicz, but what do you reckon Moscow will make of this change of tone and this running out of patience that Donald Trump is having with Vladimir Putin? Because, I mean, the main goal of Russian diplomacy over the last few months was to convince the US that the main obstacle to peace in Ukraine lies in Kyiv, not in Moscow. And for a moment there, they seem to be succeeding.
I think that the key point, as far as I can gather for everything what the Russians have said on this subject, is they just don't believe that Donald Trump is capable of staying constant to one policy. I think you'll find that they reckon that in the next month or in next week, or who knows, tomorrow, he might change his mind yet again. When you're dealing with instability, you cannot, on that basis, think that you've failed or you've got a problem just because he turns on you. He might go the other way quite possibly in a week's time or a month's time. So I think you'll find that Russia has taken this very easily and will make a muted response and will carry on as before.
Well, let's turn to Russia and North Korea and that meeting between Sergei Lavrov and Kim Jong-un. I mean, how significant is it? Or perhaps it's not particularly significant in any new way beyond strengthening the already existing relationship?
It's the latter, and as such, it is important. Actually, Belarus and North Korea are the only allies that Russia has, in the true sense of the word. Semi-allies are China, arguably India, which takes an awful lot of oil from Russia, arguably Iran, which is Russia didn't help, but on the other hand, Iran has actually supplied Russia. But North Korea has not only been an ally like Belarus, but gone one step further, supplied arms and munitions. As such, this visit is important. It strengthens the bonds. It shows there's going to be no cracking of this alliance in the near future, which means that Russia has more troops at its disposal, which is, on the whole, a bad day for Ukraine from that point of view, to offset the good news from Washington.
And I mean, it's emerged that North Korea supplies over half of Russia's current munitions. I mean, does that figure surprise you, given how quickly those supplies have increased over a short period of time? I understand that that is even a low estimate, because some have gone as high as a flabbergasting 90%.
Yeah, I'm terribly sorry. I remain unconvinced by many of these figures. We simply are not privy to all the information. Russia hides everything. It could be as high as 50%, maybe higher. It could be lower until historians get their hands on the details, and that's likely to be some time, because Poland to this day has not recovered documents about World War II issues or the subsequent murders carried out by the Russians, including the NKVD, which is the KGB, so to speak, in those days. It may be that we won't learn for a very long time what the truth is. What is clear, or we can say, is a large proportion of Russian munitions do come from North Korea. But the percentages, I wouldn't touch any of those figures.
But of course, both the North Korean army and the Russian army originate from the former Soviet Union, and so they both have compatible calibers, as they say in the army. And of course, North Korea has a planned economy, so they can easily mass produce stuff like ammunition. And of course, it is a highly militarized society, so they're in a permanent state of mobilization, aren't they?
Oh yes, for North Korea, it's absolutely a wonderful time. No problem at all about producing munitions. They finally have a real ally. Please remember, it was called not just the Hermit Kingdom because it welcomed no visitors. No one wanted to be an ally. Suddenly, Russia is absolutely full-on ally. North Korea loves it. There's also technology going the other way. Please remember, what we're looking at is quite possibly North Korea getting its hands on far, far better nuclear missile technology, because Putin is not paying just with money. He's paying also with know-how. This is a very important factor for Japan, South Korea, and maybe even USA, because the missiles could quite easily reach USA if he got his hands on the correct technology. So for North Korea, without raising much of a sweat, they already have a standing army, they're already militarized, and in return, they have real payoffs. So for them, it's good news, and has been good news ever since the two countries allied formally.
What an illuminating experience this has been. Thank you very much indeed. Dr. Marek Laskiewicz is the International Affairs Analyst. He was talking to me on the line from London.